Thank you all for coming to this session. I want to kick off with the data story. There's loads to choose from, but I'm going to start with the BFI data. In 2018, only 8.3% of lead roles went to ethnically diverse actors, and it also showed that groups like East Asian actors and South Asian women were almost invisible. So to everybody, again, because we've got so much to talk about, I'd love just a short half a minute or so on how things have changed in your corner.
We still see a lot of issues with a lack of, especially diversity is a really homogenous term. And I think we need to recognize that it has so many different groups of people intertwined within that, with many different experiences, and a lot of people who intersect these different communities in all these different ways, who then experience further inequity.
So in your corner, what have you seen as a positive? And give me an example of what needs to change.
A positive is we are seeing more representation, and I think what we are recognizing is that the public do want productions that feature society and they can see themselves on stage and screen, which I think is a huge positive. We know that there's an appetite for it.
And the negative, I guess, is not far enough, still work to do.
Yeah, and I think a lack of recognition for how far we have to go, and a lack of statistics, and when we do have statistics, that it's not highlighted and showcased enough.
For me, I want to see more incidental representation of disability, where it's not impinged on the fact that this, it's just a disabled story or it's a disability-led story. Yes, amazing, we need those stories, but we also need the shared equity of these people just happens to be there. Like, I'm a deaf actor, like what if I'm a police officer? How does that, change the story without it making it about the fact that I'm wearing hearing aids and I'm deaf and I lip read and all of these things here. Just an awareness of like we're 20% of the population, and that needs to be represented across our entire narrative landscape, stories, in front and behind the camera. And negative, I would say, not to like feel like we can pat ourselves on the back yet and go, well, we've done that. Like, or to single out, a couple of people doing the same thing, and it's this only this disabled actor, only this disabled role for this person. I think we need to create a chain reaction of how do these people grow in our careers, and we have to break that glass ceiling, because the reality is the glass ceiling for disabled actors is so much lower compared to your average non-disabled counterparts. So I mean, I could go on.
Indeed, the glass ceiling generally. Noreen, can I direct your answer to the Diversity Development Fund work in terms of what's changed and what hasn't?
Yeah, I think for us, it's the positive is that we've been able to put kind of money behind it. And I think that's the difference. I think we can all be talking shop, talk about policies and blah, 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 blah. But if you don't have money backing it, it makes no sense. So we actually have an £80 million fund that we launched in 2022, which was about content, making diverse content. And actually we renewed it for another 3 years this January. And it's really looking at diversity on screen, off screen, and also really looking at how creatives can make better shows for us with diversity at the heart. And also, to your point, the creatives from just, disabled backgrounds also having a chance to be like, yes, we own this story, we can be part of this. If you look at like Code of Silence, which we did recently, actually a second series is going to be made as well. So it's kind of going, audiences want it, and we need to, look after what the audiences want, right? So I think it's been quite exciting to be at that kind of that seat at the table where you go, actually, creatives can also be part of it and driving the change with us. In terms of a negative, I think we're still trying to make it as nuanced as possible, because if you're Asian, you're not just Asian. You could be Southeast Asian, East Asian, you can be whatever, you know what I mean? Similar with like, if you're black, you're not black, you could be from, these African communities or Caribbean communities. So getting to that point, I think that's where I think I want to see even more and like push kind of, we're not a monolith. And there's so many of us and so many stories out there. And how do we keep pushing for that change? That's why I'm really excited that we've got stuff like Red Eye and things like that, The Bay, things like that, really pushing kind of the nuances of diversity as well. And again, making it incidental rather than just, oh yeah, they happen to be. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. I think it's quite exciting time, right? So I'm a bit of a half glass full person. So you're not going to get me, Amanda. I'm not going to like, no pause for me. I'm like, go, go, go.
My job is
So,
to
yeah.
facilitate, not to see it. Okay. Ash, let's dive into that.
Well,
Go, okay,
I've
what's
got-
the reach? What's the
What's the
stretch
reach?
here?
Yeah, well, I mean, I've got to be careful because I've got a colleague from ITV, which is glass half full, obviously. So yeah, it's great. But yeah, I feel like obviously, you know, positively, to even to have a character that exists in that world on a soap. You know, when I was growing up, there was no trans representation on TV at all. So it was unmanaged. I can't even speak. Should have done a warm up. It was hard to imagine that, you know, you'd even have a character like that. So that was the pull to want to audition for a role like that. But the problem is, and you know, I don't want to echo everyone else, that you're still seeing sometimes quite a 2D representation, and you're seeing a stereotype, and you're not always seeing a fully fledged human and a character. And I think the problem is, I mean, I'm speaking specifically from a trans perspective here, that we're at a point in the world where bad representation could be incredibly dangerous. And it's great that we're seeing actors that are getting cast, you know, that happen to be trans, that are playing a trans role. But are there any trans writers in the room? Are there any?
And are there?
No. Well, not in my room. So I feel like what's happening is we're doing the right thing by going, oh, let's cast this person. But then what's landing on diversity actors
And the narratives that don't...
that they're not paid for.
Mhm.
And they're having to do that thing where it's kind of like, you know, oh, I'm grateful for the opportunity, thank you.
Yeah.
And we're still there, you know, and I feel like there needs to be, obviously, you know, you saying we're lying down on the glass table. I'm outside the door, you know, I'm not even in the room yet. And I think that, like, you know, in terms of where we're at in the world right now, we probably do need to look at how we're supporting those actors that are facing that everyday sort of challenge.
So it's a support.
But it's also really good, and the fact that we've got you know, the character from my point of view in the show is
So it's
incredible.
about the support and informing the narrative from
Yeah.
authentically. So Kelly, I mean, that you can talk a lot about informing the narrative from inclusive perspectives. Tell me about the positives, but tell me also about what the stretch is for you as well.
Positive is the amount of especially young talent that's starting to come through that are from all walks of life is fantastic. And I don't feel any more than when we're casting whichever show it is, whichever budget, whichever channel or network studio, that we do have access to a lot more performers from all different, you know, from everywhere. And I find that there will lead to the negative, which is, it's just, I can't believe we're still having to educate in the room about simple things that we've all just discussed now. But at the same time, I'll go back to a positive. You know, you're absolutely right what you're saying about, you know, consultancy and everything. I think it's starting to happen a lot more. Frauds, I think, did that very successfully recently that I worked on. But again, going back to the negative, I think from the casting point of view, I always come back to this same problem, which is about money. And I think that we're part of a massive systemic money issue in our business that we're just not addressing, which actually everything that we're going to talk about today will come down to one main point.
We'll come back to the money. So Daniel,
Mm.
Heart Stopper
Sorry.
was intentional and groundbreaking casting.
Yeah.
If a role needs specific lived experience, like a young trans character, how do you guarantee that audition space is genuinely safe for that actor whilst respecting privacy and legal rules? How do you make that space safe?
I mean, for me, it's a given and it's a natural
But if
process.
it's not,
But it shouldn't not. It shouldn't not be within an industry that is structured. It's beyond my comprehension that would ever be a question.
I guess
Not for you, I mean,
well, there may be a parallel in health and safety development, for example, where we now look at things like intimacy coordinators and go, well, how on earth did they film for the last 50 million years without having someone in the room? So yes, it should be, but it isn't. So for those where it isn't, how do we make it safe?
Tying in with Kelly, money. I'm incredibly privileged. So the positive is to work on something like Heartstopper, and it's brought me professional and creative fulfillment. But it's one of the hardest jobs I've ever done for many, many reasons. But it had no budget. And it costs money to educate, and that can be quite incredibly limiting. We are still, as Kelly says, educating in the room. Have you any idea what it's like to explain to the top brass, networks, executive producers, sometimes directors, what racism is, what transphobia is? Oh, that bit in the script here is incredibly transphobic. No, it's not. But it actually is. And this bit could be, that's what we're dealing with on a regular basis. So I just have to also say, just because I don't get to say it, art has always reflected the society that we live in. And we as a community, as an industry, of course, we're in an echo chamber, and it's about doing the right thing. We are, most of us, liberal people, but the world is spinning backwards into a right wing. We will have Nigel Farage as the new Prime Minister. That will have a knock-on effect of our industry, and it already is. There are no budgets, not enough budgets for diverse storytelling. I am still dealing, women still get killed on the first page of a crime drama. It goes on and on and on and on. And it's a reflection, and I really like to hope that we're changing, we're moving. I don't think we are.
Well, I mean, I was going to say we can come back to the money and we can come back to the political context in a moment. Let me go back to that statistic that we started with. I mean, that was BFI statistics here at the BFI. Where do you see that change? How does it feel? How has it landed? What positively?
I mean, I think
How's that landscape changed since then?
I think the fact that there are some statistics, I think the fact is we don't know. So there's not enough data in the film industry anyway. Like television has Diamond, there's a little bit more in the way of accountability and kind of counting, but we actually don't know. We're quite behind the curve as an industry in terms of understanding. I mean, and I would say data is very useful. It's kind of like a skeleton. It's the foundation. It allows us to see what's happening, where we're going, but it's not the answer. And I think for a while it was the answer for everybody. It's like, we're collecting data. Oh, and it's really bad. Anyway, we'll just carry on doing what we were doing before. So I think superficially there has been some change because everybody was like, oh, like, get some diverse people on screen. I think that's happened. Everybody's talked about how nuanced that is, whether that is very intersectional, like what people are allowed to play, what those stories are. And I think it is about storytelling for me. There are many, many stories to be told, and I don't think we tell them all. We've had 40 films about Queen Victoria, and yet if you're trying to make a film that is
she was our queen.
I know, a long time ago though. How many lives does she live? But if you're trying to make a diverse story, it's all a bit like, well, we've had one that was about that group. We've had another that was about that group. So I think there's that. I think there's a lot about who is making, because I still think there are a lot of gatekeepers and a lot less movement in terms of bringing talent through behind the camera and who can control those stories, what they look like, what they're about, whether they're authentic or not. So I think that's an issue. And I think the fact that we are dialing back tells you what isn't embedded and how far we would have to go to stop that dial back. The fact that it's so easy for companies to say we're just going to get rid of this diversity team shows you that it's not being held by everybody, and that is where the real change happens. I think there are a lot of people that feel very strongly about it, people who look like us. If you're from a marginalised background, you do this work anyway, no matter what your job title is. But the fact that it's kind of become this industry within itself, DEI has become an industry within itself that can then be sort of gotten rid of because it's like we don't do that anymore, is a real concern. And I think there's something about how we do this work and how we embed that work and make it everybody's responsibility.
Can we dive into whose responsibility and what both the public and the industry can do to keep people accountable?
Listen to young people. What drives me absolutely nuts is that actually the audience that we need to be looking at are the people who are in primary school now. The people who will be going, will be either becoming actors in 15, 16 years' time. That generation, as you just said, they look at social media.
So what would that look like, listening to those young people practically as an industry? There's a primary school over there. What would you do to help the industry listen to them effectively?
Present our best assets, our best work, our best people, our most articulate and understanding of next generations coming through, and present the future of this industry, which is on a knife edge, in a positive way, in the way that young people, our future people who will go to the theatre or not, people who will watch television, films that will be TikTok films, present it. That's how you get it. Young people from 25 under do not watch linear television. They do not go to the theatre, and they rarely watch films.
So my question is about how we engage usefully
Social
with that
media.
audience. I want to open that up to others, if anyone wants to jump in. Ryan, thanks.
I think it's really important to make this discussion more public. You know, Forbes did a survey in 2023 where they looked at all films that were released, feature films this is, and there was only 35% of the speaking roles that were female. That's shocking. This is 50% of the population, and the public don't know that. So it's about the public being aware. We need to get outside of our own echo chamber and actually discuss this with the people who are consuming it, because everyone consumes our industry. It's something like 92% of the population watch, TV and film. That's huge. But none of them really dissect it and understand it. And people have gotten very used to not seeing their own stories on screen. And I think it's really important to recognize, I'm monologuing now, it's really important to recognize that visibility is not equity. Because as we've heard, we're talking through all these stories where Daniel's saying this is transphobic. We're talking through stories of people of color, working class stories. Ash is saying there aren't trans writers on the show. I don't know about deaf writers, for example. I'm just jumping with the panel that we have. And we're seeing it more on screen or more on stage than we're seeing it behind the camera
Actually,
or off stage.
I want to go to Gabriella on that point.
Not to speak on behalf of the entire DDN community, I can only talk about the deaf perspective and my own consultancy and experience in that way. I think the answer from the full disabled community perspective, the non-negotiable is flexibility. And that's not as a concept, that is like an actual contribution and commitment from every single person in the production on how we can be flexible, adaptable to meet the needs of that individual person so that they have equity on set. And yes, it always comes back to money and budget. From the deaf perspective, the non-negotiable, I think, is training. It's deaf awareness training, but implemented like contractually, legally, at the beginning, pre-production, before the deaf person even arrives on set. And this is so everybody starts on the same page, because to avoid having to consult on set in the room. The amount of times that I am my own pastoral care consultant, sometimes writer, script editor, within my role as an actor on set within 5 minutes of having to shoot something, it is a regular thing, and we shouldn't say that that's okay. And it has never been okay, but we should say, no, that's enough now, actually.
Like, access is for everybody. Like, if you made that the problem with our industry systemically is that it only serves very few people. Like, it doesn't actually really work for anybody. So like, if you did that, if you asked everybody what their access needs were, it's a better place to work for everybody. It gives people access. It opens up the door, as opposed to kind of creating barrier upon barrier upon barrier that
In
people
theatre,
can't
there are access riders as part of the contract. Is that not the case in screen?
Not
Oh, interesting. Gabriella says no.
no.
I see a lot, but obviously you're saying not uniformly and consistently.
No.
But we implement it.
Yes.
Okay.
We as an office, we always implement it.
Okay.
Most casting directors do
Yeah.
implement that.
For those of you that don't know what an access rider is that helpful to unpick? Yeah, access rider is a document where the person with the access need doesn't do a medical history of what they have. It's just about what their needs are in the room, so they have equity with their equals essentially on set. So mine would be, a group of interpreters from my preferred list, deaf awareness training before I entered the role, possibly a note taker, regular eye breaks if it's a very long shoot, etc. Just examples of like what you need to do your best work in that space. Access riders, I know CDs are implementing them and agents are setting them on. I think though, sometimes people just go, I've acknowledged the access rider.
Yeah.
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 I want the access
has
rider to be
worked.
implemented at a contract level, so it is a legal document that you actually have to adhere to. And I think if you're negotiating that at contract level, there is the safety that the person with the access need, who not necessarily just disabled people, have, like, you know, I need my medication in a fridge or whatever it is, can arrive on set feeling confident that their needs will be met
That's really
because they have to be.
Nuri,
So go to
yeah.
jail.
I just want to big up
Yes.
the role of the access coordinator, because obviously we've got intimacy coordinators, which has been such a game changer for our industry. I think access coordinators play such an amazing role right now. We have some fantastic people who've been trained, who are from the disabled community as well. So it's a lived experience. They're going on set. They're actually doing exactly what Mel's just said, which is going, it's not just, we can ask everyone. We're not going to just single out people who might be disabled. We're going everywhere and saying, right, what do you need? What are your access needs? And actually, ITV, we have the first in-house access coordinator, and her role is to go to each drama, to go to every kind of scripted thing and go, right, what do we need? What can we do to make, you know, everyone's life, you know, better, and so they can just do their job. And we've also just hired our first access coordinator for unscripted too. So we've got two people who are dedicated to that, but then we also hire people freelance on set as well. So I think as an industry, TV, obviously I'm not talking about film, but TV, we're trying our best. And I think that is a real advance in, you know, the way we treat access.
particularly advanced is applying it to non-scripted, because I think we have a real understanding about taking care, whether we do it or not, with the industry, with people within, but our intersection with people who are not is really critical. So that's fascinating. Kelly, I wanted to come to you to ask, you're sitting here and I feel like you have possibly a positive rosy glow about you because of the productions that you've worked on and what you've achieved there, not to denigrate anyone else on it, but my question to you is about how do you manage that given the constraints of budget? Who is the most important role on a production to make that inclusion that we all want realised?
I'm very lucky because I get to work in quite often fantasy shows. That's why I love doing them. I get to create these huge big worlds where anything goes. And that, as a result, I can do whatever I want with whoever I want. So I'm really lucky with the jobs that I've got. And that's not because I'm better at it than anyone else. It's just that is just the showrunners I've ended up working with, and they're incredibly inclusive people, I find.
And are you also saying that fantasy allows you to do things reality doesn't?
Correct. So I'm lucky. So Wheel of Time, which was sadly cancelled, which no one watched. Hence it got cancelled. Did you watch?
Yeah, I did.
One of the most inclusive casts ever. It's the queerest thing you've ever seen. Oops. You can tell when I've done a show. Anyway, so I think, I've been very lucky, and it has, and because I work for Shonda Land as well, obviously that comes from the top too. So on Bridgerton, on Chaos, I think we achieved that again. It came from Sister Pictures, again, an incredibly inclusive company to work for. So obviously there's problems everywhere, but on the whole, the people at the top have been very lucky.
Right, so you've talked about the luck of one having an inclusive mindset, but also working with leadership that's inclusive. Again, to the room, what do you do? What structures and processes do you put in place if leadership isn't inclusive? Because we are not all the same.
So as Daniel said, I think one of the skills that we have as casting directors, when the script lands on your desk, even if you're meeting on the project, that is one of your first questions that you want to discuss with the producers. And you have to assess yourself, because you don't want to push it too hard so that you don't get the job because you don't quite know those people yet. But it's one of the, I can see there's quite a few of my fellow casting directors in here who are very good at their jobs, and it's one of the things we tend to go, right, what are we going to do about this? It's just what we do. So we put it out there as quickly as possible in the room, and at the first stages of us reading scripts, and we can get scripts changed, and that is our job.
What advice, what tips would you give to an actor who wants to influence the script because they see flaws in the script, and at what stage do you encourage them to do that?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a learning experience. I mean, we had a good chat, didn't we, before? Very similar experiences where often you notice stuff that you know that is going to be potentially damaging or just completely not right.
Yes.
And of course, you wouldn't know that perspective if you didn't know it. And you often have to have quite difficult conversations with a producer. And as a jobbing actor, you know, that can sometimes be quite challenging because you don't want to lose your job by saying, I can't do this, you know.
So how do you manage it? What do you recommend?
So I think it's coming at it from a collaborative sense. And I think the key is with ITV, you know, they said to me, we're so open to anything you know, if you're not comfortable, let us know. Your experience is so valuable. You know, please, you know, let's collaborate together. So it is a collaboration. So to other actors, sometimes you have to take those jobs. You know the script's not going to be great. The consultation hasn't been done. And I would always approach it with a, look, I think this would really lift it. You know, I think this would give an authenticity that the audience will really
And do people respond to that well?
Absolutely.
Is there a trigger word we can suggest for everyone to make it land with people who aren't thinking?
Get consultants, you know, but I would say, I think I always sort of come at it as approach of, hey, you know, I've got a really authentic insight here that I think could really serve this narrative, serve the story. And there was like, that's really great. Yeah, you know, and, you know, sometimes obviously it's not always not possible because soaps are so fast, you can't be over all of the scripts. But a great example of it was when I started, we didn't have any consultants on the show. And I was often having to do that. And as an actor who, you know, was quite naive, I didn't always know if I could speak up and say. And then, you know, I think over the years you get a bit more confidence. And I think I asked for consultation. We had a particular storyline coming up, and it was a trans guy in a prison setting. Now, although I'm trans, I've never been in prison before, just to let you know. So I thought, you know, can we get some consultancy on this? Because, you know, it's beyond my scope, really. So we did, you know, and we actually got to speak to some amazing people, a prison officer who happened to be trans, a trans inmate, and the authenticity that they gave us, right? Emmerdale isn't a trans audience, it's a mainstream program, and by having that authenticity, the audience that were coming up to me afterwards, big burly blokes who, you know, probably slagged me off to high heaven on Twitter many times, were saying, oh, I'd have looked after you, mate. You know what I mean? And I think like having that real human, authentic experience, like any acting on screen, it's more believable. People hit, you know, it's like Heartstoppers, it's like It's a Sin. When people have got a shared experience and they're really getting that richness in there, it just works for the production, let alone, it's not even a political thing anymore. It's also that it is better. So I think when we did that and they saw that it was such a popular story, they were like, okay, let's look into this.
I want to open it up to the audience, and if you don't mind, if you say your question, I'll repeat it so that we've captured that.
So the structure, the casting here, yes, that should change. So how do you think it's best to change that in the system? So just an offer. So as a deaf creative or disabled creative, there are specific lived experiences within the team prior to the casting to encourage the vision of what's happening for that person. That is mega important to the start. So I guess the question is, how do we all collectively change that? How do we normalize that in the system?
Okay.
Because
I
to
want to-
reduce the
thank you.
problem.
I mean, I think it is about that, creating that culture. And I think it is understanding that as creatives, I'm always struck by how uncreative we are as a creative industry. You know, like like the 40 Queen Victoria film, you know, like I just think, why does it feel like such a constraint to kind of open up what stories we're telling? We are storytellers. That's what we're here for. We are here for audiences. Audiences encompass everybody. So just from a sort of business point of view, we should be thinking about that from the top, thinking about what stories we're telling, who we're employing, what that leads to, what decision making that leads to. And so I think there is just and the audience plays a role in that, because, you know, go to the cinema, watch those films. The problem is that sometimes those films come out and people don't watch them. So then there's the excuse that they didn't do, or they don't have the big enough marketing budget, then they don't get to audiences. Seek them out. You know, like we have a responsibility as people to uplift talent when it does get through, to make sure that there's more and give less excuse for them to say like, oh, that's not going to work, it's not successful.
I want to move it to the money question, because that's a fundamental piece of this. Budgets aren't expanding. How do we change the narrative within constraints of, now I'm going to add to money people, the people that are there?
I'll be honest with you. I think we have to recognize the demographic that is the gatekeeper, that is leading the industry. I mean, looking at this panel here, most, if not all of us, sit in multiple categories within the minority demographic. That says a lot. And I think if we look at the world itself, that is the story that we are seeing. But the industry and the back end of the industry isn't that. So how are we supposed to showcase our world if the people making decisions don't come from that?
Jump in, Noreen.
I hear you. I think it's a bit unfair because obviously I work a lot with people across all the channels as well. So it's not just white, upper class men controlling. They're not just the gatekeepers. And I think we have to be open-minded to say there are people from all backgrounds who are in the commissioning seat right now. So it isn't just like, oh, everyone's the same.
There is also, to butt in, there is a very high incidence, for example, of queerness and creative leadership, which I think is worth acknowledging as well.
Yeah, I think that at the moment, like we do actually get data from Diamond about who are in those senior commissioning roles. And we've got a lot of mechanisms placed, I'm talking more about TV, obviously I'm not going to speak for film, where we are trying to do more, drive change in the creative leadership, the senior leadership, to make sure those stories are owned by people from those groups, or pushing those diverse-led companies also to be coming forward and going, right, we've got the ideas, we're the leaders of the future. So I do think there's change, and I do feel sometimes we get caught in this narrative where we're going, nothing's changed. And I'm like, no, actually it's changing. Is it changing fast enough? Maybe not, but we've just got to keep pushing and turbo.
So Noreen, let me focus it on the financial.
Yeah,
there is no money
financial. Yes, I will say that.
Bear with me, coming to you.
In terms of financial, yes, I do think you have to put money behind it. And with the constraints of budgets, because, TV is contracting, that's a fact. What we've done, we're putting mechanisms in place to go, right, access to work's not working. Therefore, we've got an access fund, which will now kind of pay for those costs up front. So that person is not waiting for that access to work fund to money to come through. So we're putting money behind those inclusion things that we know need actual work now.
So jumping off of your point, I guess what you're saying also in terms of there's no more money in the kit. One, there are organisations that have identified money in the pot to activate change, but also, again, subtext, forgive me if I'm paraphrasing, you're also saying we can be an exemplar, and that's what we can also do to influence other people's budgets.
100%. And also part of our fund, it's actually the commissioners who have ownership over it. So they know they've got 80 million that they have to spend on diverse content. And that's how you make change. And the BBC have something similar. If Marcus Ryder was here, he'd talk about what he's done in that sphere as well. So I do feel there's a lot of things that we're all trying to push forward.
We've missed Gabriella. The financial status is the same. What can we do, notwithstanding financial change? What is the one big thing we can do collectively to make that change?
A culture of interest in wanting to learn and expand our knowledge of each other.
Lovely. Thank you for the succinctness. Ash?
Yeah, I mean, coming from a sort of actor's angle, I would say it's about knowing what you bring into the role, and not taking the low wage and not take, because I think there's that imposter syndrome that's inbuilt sometimes as a diverse person where you feel like you're lucky to be there, I can't ask for stuff, but actually you can, and it's not unreasonable to go, can we have a consultant on this? Is it all right to have an intimacy coordinator where I've got to take my clothes off in this scene? These are like normal things that actors are allowed to ask, and I think it's just any diverse actor out there who's going to embark on playing a shared perspective role. You are offering so much an insight that they couldn't possibly write without having you in that room. So know your worth, be confident, ask, and if you're met with the fact that there's no money, I'm going to call you.
And that's true.
That's what I'm doing now.
That's actually.
But go above, I think. Do you know what I mean?
Because you can, and that's because we have these separate pots, and we're really open, and like my colleagues across, like, you know, Channel 4, we all work really closely together, where we all go, hey, should we all do it together? So there's actually change happening that way. We're going, you know, Black Hair and Makeup Group, we're doing stuff on lots of different things where we're all pooling our money. So right, we might not have like £100 million for something like that, but we'll go, right, you give 5, you'll give 5. So there is a lot of change happening across TV, which
So
is
as you're articulating, talking about your worth beyond what you're being paid, talking about the worth and the value that you're bringing to the production,
I think
and using that as part.
when budgets are tight, it's easy to cut those things, but it's okay to ask for them. And as you said, you know, that there is money there. I think it's just about, you know, validating how important it is and what you bring.
I'm afraid I have to end this conversation, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.